So I remember hearing somewhere that you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Now, you and I are incredibly blessed to be able to watch content from literal billionaires here on YouTube. So if you spend enough time on my channel and we watch these things together, chances are we're gonna get a little bit closer to that $1 billion mark.
That's just deep, bro. That's deep.
Okay, I'm just kidding. But how you guys doing? Today, we're going to be watching how this guy built a $1 billion startup. This is one of the CNBC Make It videos. These are always pretty inspiring to watch. And real quick, make sure you subscribe to the channel, drop a like, and make sure you leave me a comment at the end of the video. It's a great way to support the channel, and I do really appreciate it. But let's get right into it.
What I probably took too lightly at the time, looking back, was that if for whatever reason, I would be sitting with a ton of credit card debt if that whole thing didn't pan out.
Misfits Market is an online grocery delivery service that sells ugly, imperfect produce for cheap. In 2020, Misfits Market shipped 77 million pounds of food to more than 400,000 households across the US.
Damn, that's a lot of food.
But in just the first 4 months of 2021, Misfits Market procured the same amount of food as it did in all of 2020. In fact,
crazy growth.
Since launching in 2018, Misfits Market has expanded to both coasts and has over 1,000 employees. And it has received over $300 million in funding. Bloomberg reports its valuation tops $1 billion, putting it into unicorn territory. But Misfits Market wasn't an obvious success. In fact, it was just one of many businesses started by its 29-year-old founder, Arie Ramesh. There are 3 numbers to look out for in this story. $35,000, the amount Arie left on the table to pursue his dream of entrepreneurship. $150,000, the amount of credit card debt he personally took on to launch Misfits Market.
Oh my
and
God.
$350 million, Misfits Market's expected sales for 2021.
Perfect. All right, thanks. Take it away, Nate.
Here's how Arie Ramesh built Misfits Market into an online grocery juggernaut. For CNBC Make It, I'm Nate Skid. This is Founder Effect. Arie's story starts like so many others. When his parents were just 28 years old, they risked it all to move he and his brother from India to the US in search of more opportunity and a new life. His family settled in suburban Atlanta, where he spent a lot of time alone in his bedroom, dreaming up crazy ideas for potential ways to get rich. Then, he discovered Amazon Marketplace and saw his first business opportunity.
My idea was, we have all these required reading books and textbooks that high school made us buy every year, and then they went stale after 12 months and no one knew what to do with them. And so I basically went to all my classmates and was like, I will buy your textbooks and your required reading books for $20, $30, money that matters to you. And then I'd go and resell all of this on Amazon for $80 or $90. And for me, it was like a huge deal. It was my first time doing any of this stuff.
That's pretty clever.
I kind of learned how to be scrappy, how to get something off the ground.
That wasn't the only or even most successful business he started in high school. His parents were adamant that he get good grades, apply to top colleges, and nail his SAT. It was the latter where he found an income stream.
I had an SAT tutoring company in the back half of my high school years because I got a really good score on the SAT and I had a few friends who scored well as well. And so we ended up banding together and built a tutoring program and basically sold tutoring service to other people.
He considered his ventures as hobbies, just a way to earn some cash on the side. But the experience left a taste in his mouth for the freedom that comes with entrepreneurialism.
Here I am sitting in a building with 1,000 other people, doing the same thing, and it certainly wasn't as fun as reselling books on Amazon, which is kind of crazy to say. So I ended up actually getting drawn back into the entrepreneurship world, and I actually restarted that tutoring company that I'd been kind of working on in high school.
This time, he added a software component and developed a predictive algorithm. The only limitation for the company was his time. In 2012, 2 years into the finance program at the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania, he made a decision to put his education on hold.
I was like, I can't do this for real while I'm in school. So I took a year off from school. These days, gap years are a lot more common. Back then, it wasn't common. So I actually got a lot of heat from the Penn administration, from my parents for dropping out of college for a year. I moved to San Francisco and then I lived in LA for a little bit. I worked on a bunch of startups.
Arie actually raised $25,000 from an incubator to build something, anything. He founded 3 companies in quick succession. First, there was the men's shopping platform called Trendbent.
We got off the ground. We got like 5,000 customers. They were paying. And then we're like, this is too hard of a business to scale. Big mistake, because now there's a company called Stitch Fix, which does pretty much the exact same thing.
Then there was Store Talk, a social media shopping application.
Social buying. Interesting idea. I think it was probably early for the times.
Then he took on healthcare.
All three of these didn't go well. So I was like, okay, I think getting a company off the ground is hard and probably not for me.
After taking stock of his failures, he realized he skipped a crucial step. He needed some real-world experience. So he finished his degree and went to work at an asset management company called Apollo, where he landed in a department called Opportunistic Investing. But while he was there, he befriended a colleague who ended up at a prominent VC firm. That friend would later play an outsized role in Misfits Market success.
I lasted 10 and a half months, 11 months. And the reason I remember that and not a year is it was actually a big decision. You get a bonus at year end, 12 months in.
That decision cost him a bonus of about $35,000.
What was painful for me was being on the investor side of the table. We met management teams of these incredible companies that had scaled from 0 to, X over the course of, 3, 4, 5 years. The misery for me was less so I hate my job. It was more so like my job's fine. I really want that guy's job. Like that's really what I want to be doing. And I've tasted enough of it. I tried this in college. I tried this in high school. They didn't quite work, but I have the foundation. Now I have a finance background. I understand how to code. I've tried a few things a few times and failed. I think that I need to take a crack at this again.
So in 2014, he moved back to San Francisco and started yet another company with two co-founders, an intensive 12-week coding boot camp called Horizons. That company lasted just over 2 years and graduated some 700 students. But it was apple picking while on a rural farm in Pennsylvania with his girlfriend where he put it all together.
I don't want this to sound like this is like the cliche light bulb moment. I think it's part of the light bulb moment. There's a couple of different light bulb moments, but I spent some time talking to the farmer there and I was like, hey, who do you sell to and what do you do with all these things? And I think the most interesting thing was I was like, all the apples are on the ground. Very few of them are on the trees. What do you do with all these apples on the ground? And he was like, well, those are like number 2 and number 3 grade apples. Those can't really be sold to stores. So we'll put them in the cold storage shed for a month and a half. And if we can't sell them to our neighbors or anything like that, we'll toss them.
In high school, he discovered arbitrage, buying textbooks low and selling high. In college, he learned about building a distribution company with Trendbent. He saw the importance of creating a seamless shopping experience with Store Talk, and at Apollo, he was at the table as startups pitched their ideas on how to scale up. But he couldn't shake what that farmer told him about what happens to those number 2 apples.
By the time it kind of got to a point where, okay, the idea is sort of bursting out of my head and I have a pretty good plan on how to implement it and get off the ground, the end of the Horizons days were already there. And so we ended up shutting that down. And I was like, all right, my next thing is I'm going to get this company off the ground. It wasn't named at the time. And so I moved to Philadelphia permanently and said, all right, let's do this thing. Drove back to actually the exact same farm that we did that apple picking in.
Really?
Yep, that same farm.
He found a USDA list of organic farms in the region and called every one of them.
I always say this in these types of videos, but my favorite part about these videos is learning about the experience that led up to this big moment in these people's lives, especially when it comes to billionaires. It's so interesting to see, for example, this guy, the Amazon reselling thing that he had in high school. He learned how to do that, and that played a big role in this business. And then everything else that he did, man, it all just led up to this huge moment. And that's something that more people need to think about is each time you fail or you think you failed, you're failing forward, and that experience is not in vain. That's actually gonna help you so much in the future. So this is such a great example of that.
50 in all. Then, he spent the next few months building relationships with about a dozen farmers. His goal was to get them to sell them their number 2 or 3 produce cheap. Dirt cheap. So each time he visited their farms, even if it was just to say hi, he'd buy about $50 worth of produce.
I lived in a studio apartment. I started stacking, I had peaches, apples, tomatoes, onions, all in my apartment. There was no business to sell them yet, but it was just my way of saying thank you for your help. So I'd keep buying this stuff.
Meanwhile, he built a pre-order page on Shopify to see if there was demand for ugly organic produce. All he needed was a healthy list of email addresses.
So you saw the supply side. You knew that there was supply.
right? You went apple picking, you see the apples, but like, where's your sense of the demand? Because, you know, these are farmers. They understand that they have this number 2 apples, whatever they're called. They didn't see that opportunity. So why did you?
I think the short answer is because I'd spent so much time trying to build these other consumer-facing businesses, whether it's the social shopping, social buying app, or Trendbent, the fashion one, or even like the tutoring companies. I spent a lot of time selling to consumers and, you know, other products, not food, obviously. And I had a pretty decent sense of what would resonate in terms of value proposition. And I think the idea that I could buy something that on the supply side wasn't valued and sell it to a set of consumers at a lower price point, therefore transfer that value to them. I had a hunch that there was demand there.
He spent $150 on a logo, $1,000 on ads, and then did the unthinkable. He took out 5 credit cards and maxed them all out.
I applied for a bunch of different credit cards, approved on all of them, got a decent limit across all of them, and basically put those credit cards on Google and Facebook and started spending against those credit limits.
All on outreach.
All on outreach.
And how much, can I ask, do you think all in on those credit cards you put? Because that's a big investment in yourself, man.
It has big risk too, because by the way, what I probably took too lightly at the time, looking back, was that like, if for whatever reason, you know, I would be sitting with a ton of credit card debt if that whole thing didn't pan out. But, you know, it was probably $100,000 to $150,000 across those credit card limits spent on paid advertising.
On a product, on a promise that you can deliver ugly fruit.
Maybe even one step further than that, all I was acquiring were email addresses, nothing else. So on the bet that some chunk of those email addresses would convert to real customers. Wow. And that was something I didn't know, right? Like I probably ended up getting like 5,000 to 10,000 email addresses, something like that, maybe a few more than that. The bet was some large percentage of those email addresses would convert to customers who would pay for a box. That part I didn't de-risk.
To say Arie was bailed out by a close friend who happens to be an angel investor is a bit of a stretch, but not a big one. Edward Lando provided a crucial influx of cash, helping Arie pay off his credit card debt so he could start buying inventory.
He was like, this looks interesting. I think you're going to have to raise some money for it pretty soon. Otherwise, those credit card bills are going to come crashing down on you. And, you know, again, I'd spent some time in finance. So I also know that like if I had gone out to go raise institutional capital from traditional funds without a real business, without revenue, without like a deck, I would be laughed out the door.
To keep overhead low, Arie rented everything. A 700 square foot storage facility, the fridge in the corner to keep the produce cold, the trucks he'd use to deliver his packages. He found a couple of employees on Craigslist to help him box up the orders and used a navigation app on his phone to help him find the most efficient delivery route. He maxed out at 15 boxes a day.
And so at some point I need to get more drivers. And so I actually started hiring drivers, renting more vans. I realized about a month in that us delivering on our own vehicles would prevent scaling this quickly because it's a whole different beast, scaling kind of like a logistics infrastructure for last mile.
By the end of 2018, Misfits Market was shipping about 200 boxes a week, which got the attention of his buddy from Apollo. You know, the one who left to work for that VC firm.
And so I had kind of explained to him the whole story, like, hey, this is what I did after I left the company where we worked at, built this coding school. Now here's what I'm doing here at Misfits Market. And he's like, cool, interesting, keep me updated. And, you know, I would keep him updated pretty much every week and be like, hey, we're shipping 20 boxes a week. Now we're shipping 60 boxes a week. Now we're shipping 200 boxes a week. And at one point in time, you know, we're probably shipping a couple hundred orders a week. He was like, hey, you want to talk to our investment team?
Green Oaks Capital put up $2 million in that first round and offered to provide any future VC the company needed.
And I didn't shop around the offer. I didn't go try to raise money from 10 other people just because like I wasn't optimizing for that at the time. You know, it wasn't about like getting the best valuation or the least dilution. It was really just like, here are partners that believe in me, believe in what we're trying to do here. And they want to move quickly, and I don't have to waste my time doing 3 months of fundraising.
How long
that's awesome.
was the timeline between your picking apples to you sold your first box?
4 weeks, a month.
It was time to invest in all areas of the business, from physical operations and customer service to the fulfillment center and the marketing department.
Actually, I think the first official hire was someone to run customer service, just because people were writing out a bunch of questions being like, what is this fruit and where's my box? And so we had a customer service hire who still works for us, by the way, I'm proud to say. Our second hire was someone on the fulfillment and operations side to help manage the warehouse. And our third hire was someone to run purchasing and procurement,
Customer
to go and
service,
build these farm relationships, to scale them, to manage the weekly purchasing, to figure out, how much we needed.
Arie set aggressive goals for the company, but Misfits Market easily beat them. Its customer base doubled week after week. In under a year, Misfits Market went from a 700 square foot warehouse into a 10,000 square foot facility. But Arie wasn't about growth for the sake of growth. The bigger Misfits Market became, the more leverage he had, and the lower the company's prices.
This kind of goes to the logistics point that I made earlier. For us, like growth and scale, they're important from a business perspective because it's important for every business to grow and scale. But for us, it was also important because growth and scale meant we're able to kind of provide access to a much larger chunk of people more quickly. It's that flywheel. That growth and scale means that we have more efficient operations because we can leverage scale. More efficient operations means lower costs, means we can pass on more savings to customers. We pass on more savings to customers, you go back to that access part of the flywheel, the access affordability part of the flywheel, and it keeps spinning. So that was always the goal, was to grow really quickly, get out to as many zip codes as possible so we can serve as many people as possible, leverage that scale to drive cost efficiencies, leverage those cost efficiencies to drive further access and affordability.
That's such
Hence,
a simple
growth
idea,
was always,
wow.
Grow, not just to grow because growth, big numbers are good, but because it is fundamentally part of our mission and good for our value proposition.
By employing a large network of third-party carriers for the last mile, Misfits Market was able to expand into every single zip code in New Jersey and New York. Then came the pandemic.
It was basically the week of March 7th or something like that, I think, was when everything, went crazy. And we actually ended up having to turn off our checkout page because we could accept no new customers. We maxed out capacity in our fulfillment center. We turned off checkout for about 45 days or so while we kind of went through that backlog just to make sure that we were serving our existing customers effectively before we took on a bunch of new customers.
45 days is
Misfits
a lot.
Market growth is continuing unabated. By March 2021, exactly 1 year after COVID closed down the economy, Misfits Market was 5 times larger with a valuation of $1.1 billion. In April 2021, Misfits Market received its Series C funding of $200 million. Last year, Misfits Market opened an online marketplace where customers can buy staples like pasta, flour, and herbs. In its first full year in business, Misfits Market generated about $200,000 in revenue. By the end of 2021, Arie expects that number to hit $350 million.
And I guess one of my final questions for you would be, what was your biggest money mistake you made building the company?
We moved fulfillment centers basically 4 times in our first year and a half of existence. That was challenging, picking up and moving 10 employees, then 40, then 200 and 500 employees, and an entire operation that large is a challenging thing to do. And it's costly as well because you're running 2 fulfillment centers at any given point in time. You're shifting things back and forth. Part of that is I didn't necessarily trust the growth. I was okay, we're going to grow, but I don't really know if we're going to go 4x in the next year. So I don't really want to go invest in that quite yet, in that infrastructure. Looking back, we probably should have done that.
Wow. That
Arie
must be
built an
nice.
incredible operation in Misfits Market, but it's sitting on a foundation his parents created by taking an enormous risk on a better future. And now that Arie's older than his parents were when they immigrated to the US, the weight of their decision is becoming clear to him every day.
My dad especially told me that a ton. He's I've always wanted to go start a business. They didn't necessarily have the opportunity, and they've almost given me that opportunity by sort of setting me up in this position and sort of moving here and pay for college, all that kind of good stuff.
That's
so
pretty relatable.
The way that they would talk about it and I talk about it as well is I am probably a continuation of their American dream, and I view it that way as well, right? It's one holistic picture. It's cool, my family came here, they sacrificed a lot to sort of make all this happen. Entrepreneurship was something they were probably interested in. My father certainly was, but something they couldn't do. I've been able to do it, so it kind of ties all the way back.
Hey, we actually watched this video right here together. If you want to watch that, make sure you check out the links in the description. But wow, what an inspiring story, honestly, and what a simple business. It's basically drop shipping. Okay, I always say this, but It's basically drop shipping ugly produce. But it's true, like that's pretty clever, honestly. Wow. And it kind of gets my wheels turning for just like more business ideas. That's really cool, though I don't really need any more business ideas right now. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. I would love to know your opinion. I'm sure that this will help a lot of you guys out. It's really nice to see some bigger business perspective. I think a lot of people in this space in YouTube get caught up in the drop shipping stuff, and even though drop shipping is great, obviously it doesn't come close to starting a business of this magnitude. So I think this is really important stuff to learn about, and I hope that you guys agree. But that's it for today. I'll be seeing y'all in my next video. Peace.